The moment we pressed start on the Charlie Charlie challenge at 4 a.m., we had no idea how far it would go. At first, it felt silly, just a late night dare we thought would make a good video. The pencil balanced on the paper, the screen glowing faintly in the dark, and both of us laughing nervously, trying to hide how unsettled we already were. You know that weird silence at night when the whole house feels like it's listening. That's exactly how it felt. Every creak in the floorboards suddenly sounded louder. Every flicker of the shadows seemed alive. We hadn't even asked the first question yet, and my chest already felt tight, like something was waiting. I told myself it was just nerves, but deep down, I knew it was more. When we finally whispered, "Charlie, Charlie, are you here?" the words felt heavier than they should have. The pencil didn't move at first, which made us both laugh nervously, trying to convince ourselves that the whole thing was fake. But then, slowly, too slowly, it shifted, just a tiny twitch, but enough to silence us instantly. We froze, staring at it, waiting for it to move again. And then, as if someone invisible had breathed on it, the pencil slid until it pointed straight at yes. My heart started racing so hard I could hear it in my ears. I wanted to believe it was just gravity, or maybe we'd bumped the table without noticing, but the way it moved, it didn't feel like an accident. We tried to laugh it off. "Okay, maybe it's just a draft," I said, even though the windows were closed tight. But then, as we sat there, the room grew colder, like someone had opened a freezer door behind us. I rubbed my arms, trying to shake off the chill, but the feeling wouldn't leave. It felt like we weren't alone anymore. That invisible line between a fun game and something darker had already been crossed, and we were only a few minutes in. And just when I thought it couldn't get creepier, the pencil started to move again, slowly wobbling on its own like it was waiting for us to ask another question. But what happened next? That's where everything started to go wrong. We stared at the paper, not saying a word, like two kids who'd just seen a ghost, but were too afraid to admit it out loud. The pencil trembled on its edge, perfectly balanced, and I swear the longer we stayed quiet, the heavier the air felt in that room. It wasn't just silence anymore. It was pressure, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. My friend leaned forward, his voice cracking as he whispered, "Charlie, Charlie, do you want to play with us?" The second the words left his lips, I regretted letting him ask. The pencil didn't move right away this time. It just sat there, twitching, the tip dragging the tiniest mark across the paper, as if someone was deciding whether to answer. Then, just when I thought nothing was going to happen, it spun sharply so fast that it made us both jump. And landed on yes. We laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that makes you feel better. It was nervous, shaky, the kind of laugh you use when you're trying to convince yourself you're not scared, even though your stomach is dropping. That's when the room changed again. The shadows on the walls looked darker, heavier, like they had weight to them. The old clock in the corner ticked louder, each second dragging like a countdown. I told myself it was in my head, that the fear was just making everything feel exaggerated. But then we heard it, a faint tapping sound coming from the hallway. Tap it, tap it, tap it, slow and steady, like footsteps, but softer, too soft to be human. My friend turned to me with wide eyes, and neither of us wanted to be the first to say it. "Did you hear that?" he finally whispered. I nodded, my throat dry. We both tried to brush it off. Maybe it was the pipes. Maybe the house settling, but the tapping kept going, closer this time, and then it stopped, dead silence. That silence stretched so long it felt like it was pressing against my ears. I wanted to turn the lights back on, close the laptop, and call it quits, but some stupid part of me wanted to know what would happen if we kept pushing. So I leaned in and asked the dumbest question I could have asked. "Charlie, Charlie, are you in this house with us?" The pencil wobbled. Stopped, then, as if someone invisible had flicked it, it jerked straight to yes. My chest tightened, and we both instantly regretted everything. It was no longer just a game. This thing, whatever it was answering us with purpose. And as the clock on the wall struck 4:13, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had just stepped across the line into our world. We thought that was the worst of it, but in reality, that was only the beginning. We sat there frozen, staring at that pencil like it had just grown teeth. My friend whispered, "This can't be real, it's just a trick." But the way he said it, I could tell he didn't even believe himself. I didn't either. The air felt thicker, colder, and every shadow in the room seemed to lean closer toward us, stretching long and sharp across the floor. I told myself we could stop anytime, that it was just a game, just paper and pencils. But deep down, I knew we'd already gone too far. Then the power flickered. The lights dimmed for half a second, long enough for my stomach to drop into my shoes. The hum of the fridge in the kitchen died out, and for that brief instant, the house went completely silent. And when the lights snapped back on, the pencil was moving slow, deliberate, dragging across the paper like someone unseen had put their finger on it. We didn't even ask a question. It just started writing on its own, leaving a faint line that pointed once more to yes. I felt goosebumps crawl across my arms. My friend's face was pale, his eyes darting to the corners of the room like he expected something to crawl out at us. That's when we heard it again, the tapping, but this time it wasn't distant. It was behind us. Tap, tap, tap like nails on wood. I spun around, my heart hammering, but the hallway was empty, just darkness stretching out like a tunnel, the kind of black you can't see the end of. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to laugh. Probably the house settling, I said, but my voice cracked so bad it gave me away. My friend didn't laugh. He just kept staring into that hallway like he was seeing something I couldn't. "Ask it something," he said finally, his voice low. I didn't want to, but something in me needed to know. So I whispered, "Charlie, Charlie, if you're really here, show us a sign." At first, nothing happened. The pencil stayed still, the silence stretched, and then, from the darkness of the hallway, a low creak, like a door slowly opening by itself. Except every door in the house was already closed. My stomach twisted. The pencil began to spin again. Faster this time, it spun once, twice, then slammed to a stop on yes. My chest, tightened like a fist, had closed around my lungs. I glanced at my friend, and the look on his face told me we were thinking the exact same thing. We weren't playing this game alone anymore. And then a shadow moved at the end of the hallway. But what it did next is the part that still keeps me awake at night. That shadow at the end of the hallway froze us both in place. At first, I thought my eyes were just playing tricks on me. You know when you stare into the dark too long and shapes start forming on their own. That's what I wanted to believe. But this was different. It didn't just sit there. It moved slowly, purposefully, like it was aware of us. My friend whispered, barely audible, "You saw that too, right?" His voice shook, and I didn't even answer. I just nodded, my throat so dry I could barely swallow. The hallway felt endless now, stretching farther than it ever had before, and the shadows seemed to thicken, like the darkness itself was peeling away from the walls. We told ourselves it was time to stop. "Okay, game over," I muttered, reaching out to grab the paper and throw it away. But the second my hand touched it, the pencil jerked violently, spinning so fast it clattered off the paper and rolled across the floor. My friend cursed under his breath and scrambled backward, knocking over his chair. For a second, I thought maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe I'd bumped it harder than I realized. But then the paper itself shifted, just a little, enough to scrape against the table, even though neither of us was touching it. And then came the sound, a low, breathy whisper, not words we could understand, but something soft and close, like someone leaning right between us and letting air seep out of their lungs. I froze, every hair on my body standing on end. My friend grabbed my arm, his nails digging in, and whispered, "We need to leave, now." We stood up together, but before we could take a step, the lights flickered again, off, on, off. Each time the room plunged into darkness, I swore I saw the shadow move closer, like it was blinking toward us with every cut of the light. The final flicker left the room lit again, but colder, and the pencil had returned resting perfectly in the center of the paper, balanced like we'd never touched it. Neither of us had moved it. I reached for the laptop, ready to shut it down and forget this whole thing, when we heard the knock. 1, 2, 3 slow, heavy thuds against the wall, right behind us. Not the door, not the window, the wall itself. The sound rattled the picture frames, making them tilt. We spun around, staring at the plaster like it might crack open. My chest was tight, my pulse racing in my ears, and then silence, nothing, the kind of silence that makes you feel like the world is holding its breath. We should have run right then. We should have stopped, left the house, never looked back. But instead, my friend, shaking like a leaf, whispered the one question we should never have asked. "Charlie, Charlie, what do you want from us?" And that's when everything changed. The moment those words left his mouth, the entire room seemed to shift. The air grew heavier, pressing down on us like a weight, and for a split second, I thought I couldn't breathe. The pencil trembled violently, rocking back and forth on its edge, as though someone unseen had grabbed it and was shaking it in fury. Then, without either of us touching it, it slammed down on the word yes, the tip snapping against the paper with a crack that echoed way louder than it should have. We both stumbled back, hearts racing. My friend muttered, "That's it, I'm done." But before he could take another step, the room grew darker. Not pitch black, but as if every corner of the house was suddenly coated in shadows too thick to see through. The lamp flickered and hissed, the bulb glowing like it was straining to stay alive. I felt my stomach twist. Then, from the hallway, came the sound again, those soft, deliberate taps, except this time they weren't slow. They were faster, closer, almost like running. My blood went cold. My friend grabbed my arm, his voice breaking. "It's coming closer. Do you hear that?" And then it stopped. Just silence, the kind that makes your ears ring. I forced myself to look back at the paper, and my blood froze. The pencil wasn't pointing at yes or no anymore. It had slid off the paper entirely, resting against the edge of the table, as if whatever was controlling it wanted to make it clear. It was done playing by the rules. That's when we heard the whisper again, louder this time, still garbled, like a voice underwater, but it was right next to us. My friend spun around, eyes wide, and I swear I saw it. A figure, darker than the dark itself, standing at the edge of the hallway. Not moving, just watching. We both froze, neither of us daring to breathe. Then, suddenly, the clock on the wall chimed. One deep, hollow chime, then another, each one louder than the last. But here's the thing, our clock doesn't chime. It never has. The last chime rang out, echoing through the house, and in that exact moment, the figure moved. Not walking, not running, it slid fast and unnatural across the hallway toward us. My friend screamed, shoving the table aside, and we bolted for the living room, knocking into chairs, nearly tripping over each other. But even as we ran, I could feel it following. The air was colder with every step, and no matter how fast we moved, it was there right behind us, closer with every heartbeat. And just when I thought we'd reached safety, something happened that made my blood turn to ice. We stumbled into the living room, gasping for air, every shadow suddenly looking alive. My friend slammed the door behind us, as if that thin wooden barrier could stop whatever was chasing us. The silence that followed was worse than the sound of it moving. It was so quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, and for a moment, I thought maybe we'd escaped. Maybe it was over, but then the door handle rattled, slow, testing, back and forth. We froze, eyes glued to the knob, praying it wouldn't turn. And then click, it moved, just a tiny shift, but enough to send a wave of dread down my spine. My friend grabbed a lamp, holding it like a weapon, his hands shaking so badly the cord dragged across the floor. I didn't move. I just stared, waiting for the inevitable moment when the door would swing open and whatever waited on the other side would step through. The knob twisted again, harder, then stopped. Silence. We backed away, inch by inch, until our backs hit the couch. And just when the tension felt unbearable, the sound hit us, a sharp bang on the wall, right behind our heads. We jumped, nearly falling over, and then nothing, no footsteps, no whispers, just that suffocating quiet, as though the house itself was holding its breath along with us. I forced myself to look at the clock on the wall. 4:59 a.m. The game had started at 4. The realization hit me. Whatever this thing was, it was bound to that hour. We just had to survive until morning, so we waited, each second dragging like an eternity. My friend's grip on the lamp loosened, his breathing shallow. I clutched the arm of the couch so tightly my knuckles turned white. And then, as the clock ticked over to 5:00, the atmosphere changed. The heaviness in the air lifted, the cold began to fade, and the shadows slowly slipped back into their corners, no longer reaching for us. The door handles stopped moving, the silence returned to normal, the game was over. We didn't speak for a long time. When we finally did, my friend let out a nervous laugh and said, "Safe to say we're never doing that again." I laughed too, but it was shaky, hollow, because deep down I wasn't so sure we'd really left it behind. Because sometimes, when the house is quiet late at night, I still hear it, that faint tapping sound in the hallway. Tap, 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 and if you're thinking about playing the Charlie Challenge at 4 a.m. don't. Trust me, some games aren't meant to be played.